Hello, and thank you for joining us today. We are so excited to have you. I see that we have lots of folks that are still logging on, so sit tight. Our presentation will begin shortly. Hello, and thank you for joining us today for this informational webinar about your upcoming tour with EF Go Ahead Tours, the highlights of England, Scotland, and Ireland. My name is Nilsson. I work for Go Ahead Tours as a member of our community and engagement team, and I'm very excited to be here with you today and to be your host for this webinar. It's also my pleasure to introduce you to my colleague, Lexi. Lexi, can I ask you to introduce yourself to our travelers, please?
Hello, yes, my name's Lexi. I have been a tour director with Go Ahead for 9 years now. I do all kinds of tours. The last tour I did actually was a customized tour of England and Scotland for a Harry Potter group. And the next tour I'm going to be doing is London, Paris, Rome. And this tour that we're talking about today, the highlights of England, Scotland and Ireland, I've done several times this year. It's a fabulous tour. And yeah, it's a pleasure. Thank you for asking me here to talk about it with you.
Absolutely. And Lexi and I, we've done a couple of these in the past, and she is really a wealth of knowledge. So we're really excited to have her with us today to talk about this tour and to help answer your questions. So let's jump right in and talk about our agenda for this session. So what we're going to do is, first things first, I'm going to talk to you about entry requirements. That'll be pretty simple, but we'll still go through it. I'm also going to briefly mention our EF COVID Care Promise and what that means for you. Then we're going to get into some fun stuff. We'll talk about some tips that we have for you as you're preparing for tour. We'll talk about our app. I'll also be asking Lexi about weather, packing, money, and more. Following that, we'll talk about some recommendations and tips that we have for your air travel to and from tour. And then we're going to do an overview of the tour as well as the excursions that you can add on to enhance your experience during your trip. At the end of the session, we will have a live question and answer period. Now, for those of you at home, I do want to let you know that in this webinar format, we can't see or hear you, but we do want to hear from you, and we welcome your questions. If you look on the toolbar in Zoom, you'll see an option labeled Q&A, and you can type questions into us there. 3 of my colleagues are going to be monitoring the inbox and maybe responding to in writing. But if you don't hear from us right away, chances are we're just going to hold on to that specific question to go in our live question and answer period. I also do want to remind you that we are recording today's session. So if you want to go back and watch this later, or if someone you're traveling with wasn't able to join us at this time, you will have the opportunity to go back and watch this again. All right, so with that, let's talk about entry requirements. So some good news is, as of now, none of the destinations you're visiting on this tour have COVID-related entry requirements. So all you really need to worry about is your passport. So please make sure that you know where your passport is, that it is valid, and this is important, make sure to check that your passport will be valid for at least 6 months beyond the date that you're scheduled to return home. So when you're looking at your passport, make sure that it's not going to expire within 6 months of the date that you get back home. Now, I do briefly want to talk to you about our EF COVID Care Promise. The EF COVID Care Promise is a policy that we put in place to answer this question. What happens if I'm on tour and I'm required to quarantine? Well, for those of you, for any of you that are traveling with us, the answer is we have a promise that we have made to you that if you are required to quarantine, we will arrange and pay for your hotel, we'll arrange and pay for all of your meals, also provide you support in communicating with doctors if that's necessary, and if you purchase your flight package with us, we'll arrange a new flight itinerary to get you home once your quarantine has ended at no additional expense to you. So hopefully this is the last that you have to think about this, but I do want you to know that if the need should arise, we will be there to support you. All right, so now let's get into our section of helpful tips. So one thing that I want to mention is today we are here to help you answer your questions, but if you do have questions that come up after this meeting, but before you travel, we have a really wonderful resource on our website called the Help Center. So the Help Center is a page where you can go, and we have literally hundreds of articles about every aspect of our tour. So if you have a question, chances are you can get the answer there. In addition to that, you can also chat with us on this page or submit a request for someone to follow up with you if you aren't finding the answer that you're looking for. But this is a great place to start if you do have questions. Now, another thing that I want to mention too is the EF Go Ahead Tours app. This is an essential resource for you as you're preparing to travel and when you're on the road. So if you don't have the app yet, please go to the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store and download it. Or if you do have your smartphone with you right now, if you open up the camera app on your phone and point it at the QR code on the screen, it will prompt you to download the app. So I'm going to go to the next slide, but that QR code is still going to be there if you are pulling up your camera. So the reasons that I think it's really important to have the app is, first, as you're preparing for tour, we have a whole section called Getting Ready, and it has tons of tips in there for you to help you as you're packing and preparing for this trip. You can also find optional excursions in the app, and then you can select those and pay for them before you depart, which is really handy. And once you have your flight and hotel information, that will also be available in the app. Now, the main reason that I think this is so important is that when you are on tour, through the app, you'll be able to communicate with the other people in your group and with your tour director. So the tour directors that I talk to, what a lot of them are doing is sharing some helpful tips in there or even schedules for the next day. So if you want to be in the know, being on the app is the one way that your tour director will be able to get in touch with you and share information. And also there's the ability for one-on-one chatting. So if you're asking for recommendations about things, it can be a really helpful tool. Now, the next thing that I want to talk about is weather. So to help me with this, Lexi, I'm going to have to ask you to join our conversation again. So the folks that have joined us for today's webinar are scheduled to depart in September or October. Can you tell us a little bit about what we might expect in terms of weather in these destinations during that time frame?
Okay, yes, this is always a funny question. Okay, so for us, I would have to say, absolutely honestly, the main word is unpredictability. I don't want to depress you, but you may as well know, honestly, today I'm in England. I'm looking over your heads or your imaginary heads outside. It's quite blue sky at the moment, actually, for 6:10. But it has been raining, it has been sunny, it has been a bit windy. You get the idea. It's really hard to know. You need to bring your rain gear for sure. You need to bring it with you. And that's okay, because most of the time on this tour, you have the bus all day. So you can leave your rain jacket in the bus. It's easy. But yeah, it could be really nice and sunny. It may not be. I mean, I would say towards the end of that time, the October bit, it is getting a bit cold. So you need your jumpers plus a jacket or coat, definitely, if you're traveling sort of towards the end of that October. But yeah, I mean, these are small, windy little islands in the Atlantic, you know, so that's the truth of it.
I like how you put that, very changeable. And one thing I would say is, yeah, always be prepared for rain. I mean, Ireland, they call it the Emerald Isle, and it gets so green because there's a lot of rain. So throughout the tour, I would say be prepared for precipitation, and think about packing in layers, because if you have lightweight layers, you can add them one on top of the other, and then if it gets suddenly warmer, you can peel those off. And as Lexi said, you'll always have the bus with you for most of the tour. So if you did need to leave a jacket or a bag or something on the bus, that would be possible. So let's talk a little bit about packing with that weather in mind. So I ask that all of you try to pack as lightly as possible. If I were preparing for this tour, the way that I would pack is I would bring one big suitcase, and then I would bring a backpack as my carry-on bag. And the reason that I say that is I always want to have one hand free. And also, if you have that backpack as your carry-on bag, it just makes it a little bit easier to get around. And one thing that I do want to make sure we talk about is the train ride from London to Edinburgh. So Lexi, when we were chatting before, you were describing to me about what people will have to do to get their luggage onto and off of the train. And I would love it if you could share that with us as well.
Absolutely. So I think it's probably, in terms of your luggage and lifting and carrying your luggage, it's the hardest day of this tour for sure. So you arrive at King's Cross Station, you get off the coach, all of the station is absolutely flat, no problem with wheels or backpack, or that's all fine. Onto the platform, all flat again. But to get up onto the train, it's either, I can't remember, it's either 2 or 3 steps, definitely. So you do have your suitcase that you need to lift up 2 or 3 steps onto the train. And then almost in front of you, almost before you get into the carriage, there are some luggage racks. And that's to put your heaviest, your big suitcase into before you get to the seat. So you don't take your suitcase to the seat. So you get on, in front of you are luggage racks. There's kind of 2 shelves. Hopefully you get your heavy case in the bottom, but I mean, if it's gone already, you will sort of have to, lift it potentially. I may as well be honest with you. You potentially have to lift it onto the next shelf. Then you go to your seat, and there is a rack at the top, all along, like an airline kind of thing, a rack, and that is where your lighter thing goes, so your backpack or whatever. So just to also say that valuables, you don't necessarily want them in the case. I've never heard of a case go missing from a train, absolutely never, but still, I definitely wouldn't have my valuables over there. I would have them there or on me for sure. You want to be sensible. But yeah, so potentially you lift your lighter thing up here. And there is enough room around the seat. It's not like the seats are tiny. There's a little table and everything. You can have your handbag or whatever will be there. But I suppose that's the gist of it. And getting off the same, you're getting down. And then again in Edinburgh, it's not flat at all in Edinburgh, but there are lifts and escalators there. So that's not a problem. Yes.
Great. That is very helpful. So yeah, so you will have to lift your luggage up a few steps, and then there are racks, but it's possible that if the bottom rack is full, you might have to lift it in order to put it on the rack. And then your carry-on will have to go above your head. So that is something to consider when you are packing. Another thing that I want to mention about your carry-on bag is make sure you put essential items in the bag that you carry with you on the airplane. So the first thing here is medication. And the reason for this is you never want to put your medication in the checked bag, because if your checked bag gets lost or misplaced, you don't want to be without your medication. So make sure you have medication with you in your carry-on bag, as well as some spare clothes in case your luggage gets misplaced. And also important cell phone chargers and things of that nature. So make sure you're putting essential items in the carry-on bag. Now, for this tour, comfortable walking shoes, that is the operative word. Comfort is key. You don't need any kind of like hiking boots or anything like that, but I would say good, comfortable walking shoes will be very important because, we're covering a lot of ground and you're going to want to see a lot. So comfort is the operative word there. And then we talked a little bit about clothing you can layer. Think about pieces you can sort of mix and match with one another, and that you could layer underneath a raincoat. So if you do have a cooler day where it's raining, you want to think about pieces that you could layer underneath your raincoat to keep the wind and the rain off of you. Now, in these places, you can use a reusable water bottle just fine. And I would encourage you to do so. You can save some money and save some plastic if you do bring your own water bottle. Now, electrical adapters, you will need that. I have a whole slide about it though, so hold on to that thought. We will get there in just a moment. Now, Lexi, I always encourage people to pack lightly, but then we often get a follow-up question of, is laundry available during the tour, to help try and cut down on laundry? So if someone did want to do laundry on this tour, what options might they have?
Yeah, Nielsen, I mean, I'm well aware that we're saying pack lightly, and I'm also saying we don't know what the weather is. I'm really sorry, but it is, yeah, so I guess it's packing smart, isn't it? Laundry, it's not a perfect answer here either, I'm afraid. But again, I'd rather be honest and give you the full facts. So all of the hotels, I think pretty much all of the hotels have a laundry service where you put your stuff into a bag and then they come and collect it, and it kind of goes off site. Someone does the laundry and it comes back to the hotel. Just 2 negatives with that. The one is it's very expensive because someone comes and collects it, I suppose. So I'm thinking $10 or even £10 for a t-shirt or something. It is really quite dear, what we would think would be expensive. And the other negative with that is if you decide to use it, make sure you build in enough time. So if it says 24 hours, I would definitely say, oh gosh, what if it was a bit late? You know, you want to sort of be aware of that. You don't want to be, just once it's happened to me that literally we were all on the coach and the chap was at reception and then he came running out with his bag and jumped onto the coach. That's happened to me once, but we were at the point where we were leaving his bag of clothes behind. You know, it has to be done. But normally that's fine, but I would build in a cushion. So the other thing to say is the cheaper way, obviously, is there are laundrettes, what we would call a laundrette, you know, a public one where you can go and you can pay and you can take your laundry. But just be aware, not every place, you know, London or Dublin, you may not have loads of time. So without knowing the hotels that you're going to be in on the tour, which I don't know exactly, I would say they will be somewhere nearby, relatively nearby, but be aware of the time that they close in the evening and be aware of, you know, whether you're going to leave the stuff or whether you're going to sit with it, which you can also do, you know, stay there. And yeah, you don't want to miss out on anything else. So I would say it's not a completely easy answer here. They are there to be found, but not completely easy. Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough because one option is expensive from a financial perspective, and the other one is, you know, it takes time, which is probably even more valuable if you're going on this tour. You know, you only have so much time, so that's the other consideration. But those are the options that you would have if you were interested in doing laundry on the tour. Now let's talk about electricity. So in the UK and Ireland, the type of outlet they use is called a Type G outlet. So you can see it on the screen here. It has 3 rectangular pins. If you're coming from North America, you're going to need an adapter to make it so you can plug into those outlets. So for most devices, all you will need is an outlet adapter that will change the shape of your plug. But one thing to be aware of is that the voltage of electricity in the UK and Ireland is higher than what we have here in North America. So here in North America, it's, you know, 100 to 110. There it's 220 to 240. So for most devices that you would probably plan to bring on tour, this is not going to be a problem if you just have an outlet adapter. So for example, most modern electronics like cell phones, laptops, cameras, these things are what we call dual voltage. So what that means is that they can work in North America. They can also work in Europe or another location that has this higher voltage. The types of devices that you need to be careful about are typically hair care devices like flattening irons and curling irons. So often the ones that are sold here are only designed to go up to 110 volts. And if you tried to plug that into an outlet in Ireland, for example, it would probably fry the device and ruin it. You could also flip the breakers in the hotel, which is not a fun time. So first of all, I would say, if possible, I just encourage you to leave those devices at home. Or you can also buy a travel one for travel that's designed to work up to 240 volts. That's an option. Some of them I know can work with voltage converters, which is a device to reduce the voltage entering your device, but some of them aren't. So again, be very, very careful with this because you could run into issues there. So I saw a question here from Kim asking if CPAP machines are okay with just the outlet adapter. In most cases, Kim, yes, CPAP machines generally tend to be dual voltage, meaning they can operate on 240 volts electricity, but I would check your device individually. If you look at either the bottom of the device or perhaps on the cable, usually you can see something that says input 110 to 240 and it'll have the voltage there. So check your specific device. And the other question that I just see coming in from Leslie is if hair dryers are available at the hotels. Lexi, is that something that people typically find in the rooms there, is a hair dryer?
I would say absolutely always. Always. Just be aware if it's not in the bathroom, which is unlikely to be because we're not allowed to use hair dryers in the bathroom in these countries that you're coming to on this tour, it will be in a drawer in the bedroom somewhere. So always, there's always one. And if you absolutely can't find it, then obviously ask me or ring the front desk. You know, there will be one, that's for sure. Yes.
Great. All right, so with that, let's move on to talking about money and handling money on tours. So on this tour, you're going to be using 2 different currencies. So when you're in London and Edinburgh, you're going to be using the pound sterling. And then when you cross over to the Republic of Ireland, you're going to be using the euro. So some things that I would say to be aware of. One of them is that credit cards are widely accepted everywhere that you're going to be going. The most widely accepted cards are Visa and MasterCard. So if you have those cards, you're going to be pretty well set. I would say that American Express is much less, it's accepted less than the other ones, so I wouldn't rely on an American Express card. For that matter, I would say bring more than one card in general, just in case one has some kind of issue. I have received questions about Discover Card. I wouldn't bother bringing it. I don't think that you'll find retailers that will take Discover Card. Now, you probably will want to have cash during the tour as well, and the best way to get cash is simply to withdraw it from ATMs. Your tour director or your hotel front desk will be able to point you to where ATMs are so that you can go and then and withdraw cash from ATMs. If you wish, you could also get a little bit of cash to bring with you for the first day of tour, but really you don't need to bring much because as soon as you're there, you'll be able to find ATMs pretty easily. Lexi, do you have anything else that you think is important to add about handling money on tour before I get into tipping recommendations?
I would say that's great what you've said. Yes, definitely ATMs. It's becoming much harder to change if you bring too much. If you want to change a lot of American or Canadian money, it's becoming much harder to go into a bank and change it now. A lot of those sort of foreign exchange counters seem to have closed during COVID. And in Ireland, you can't change money in a bank without an Irish bank account. So definitely a card and then using the ATMs to get cash. I would say, yeah, you're spot on with that. Yeah.
Oh, one thing that I have heard is it necessary to have a 4-digit PIN? Sometimes people have like a 6-digit PIN. Is it okay to have a 4-digit PIN number, or is it required to have a 4-digit PIN number rather?
Actually, I don't know this answer to that. All I can tell you is that in 9 years, I've not been asked that question.
Okay, so this might be more of an issue in Southern Europe, because I have heard of it being an issue in Southern Europe. So that might not be as important here.
No, I haven't heard anyone say they couldn't withdraw money before.
Okay.
The only time that's happened is when their own bank, maybe they didn't tell them, ideally tell the bank before you leave. You know, like if you never travel and then you suddenly did, it was that's happened that I've experienced, you know, that the bank then wouldn't let them take the money out.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Make sure you contact your bank so they know you're traveling, because otherwise they might think some funny business is going on if all of a sudden your account is spending money in London. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about tipping. So when you travel with Go Ahead, we have folks that we've arranged to be there for you to help you have an incredible time on tour. So you have a tour director and they are with you from the beginning of the tour through the end. They're going to be doing sightseeing tours with you. They're also going to be doing a lot of logistical work in the background to make sure that you're moving seamlessly from point A to point B and having wonderful meals. Of course, you'll have bus drivers on this tour. You'll probably have different bus drivers in London and then different bus drivers in Edinburgh. Once you get to Ireland, you'll probably have the same driver for a number of days. So you will have different bus drivers throughout the tour. And then local guides. These are subject area experts that we bring in to help with certain sightseeing tours. Like in London, we'll bring on a Blue Badge guide to give us a tour of London as well as Windsor Castle. So with all this being said, we do recommend tipping these folks, and for your convenience, we've provided recommended tipping amounts. So for your tour director, we recommend tipping the equivalent of $8 to $10 US per person per day of your tour. For bus drivers, we recommend tipping the equivalent of $3 US per person per day of your tour. And for local guides, we recommend tipping the equivalent of $2 US per person per tour that they lead for you. I also, this tipping should be done in cash. People frequently ask me if they can use Venmo or other apps like that, but for these tips, we ask that you please do tip in cash. The next question that we frequently get is if the tipping can be done in US currency or if it matters which of these two currencies that the tipping is done in. And what I would say is, my first response is every tip is appreciated. So if what you have is US dollars, that will be appreciated. If what you have is euros or what you have is pounds or a combination of the two, that would be appreciated. I would also say that if possible, local currency is absolutely preferred, because then folks don't have to exchange it. And I would say that in particular for local guides and bus drivers who you might be tipping smaller amounts, if those can be in local currency, that would be more convenient for them, so they don't have to go out of their way to do an exchange for a small tip. So those are some considerations that you might think of as you're budgeting for your tour. Okay, so let's get into some tips that we have for getting to tour, and then we'll talk about your arrival day. So when you travel with us, we do have some things that we want to make sure that we mention. Now, here at Go Ahead, we can help arrange your flights for you, but one thing that we always like to remind people is that seating is ultimately at the discretion of your airline. So we can submit requests on your behalf, but at the end of the day, they can change those, and they are up to the airline. So I always recommend downloading the app for your airline so you can manage your reservation beforehand. Many of them do allow you to pick seats and do things like enter your dietary preferences. So please do download the app for your airline. These days, we're also recommending people arrive extra early. Just give yourself plenty of time. You'll thank yourself later if you get there with a lot of time, so you don't have to worry about security lines, and you can be sitting pretty at your gate. And one time another time we would like to remind you to please pack essentials in your carry-on bag, like medication, toiletries, and spare outfits. Okay, so let's take a moment to talk about what happens if you are delayed en route to tour. So if you just have a delay that pushes back your arrival to London by half an hour, say, these kind of things are not a huge deal. They happen. The bigger and more complicated situations are if you have a flight that gets canceled, or if you have a delay that causes you to miss a connecting flight. So if either of those two things happen, the airline is responsible for providing you with a new flight itinerary. The technical term that we use for this is reprotect. So again, if you have a flight cancellation or a delay that causes you to miss a connection, your airline is responsible for providing you a new flight to your destination, and this is what we call reprotecting you. So what you should do in those circumstances is work directly with the folks from your airline. And when you're talking to them, you can use that word reprotect, because it indicates to them what the situation is and what their responsibility is to you. So if you do need support, or if you have new flight information to share with our team, you can contact our on-tour support team 24 hours a day. This phone number is also in the app, so if you have the app, you'll always be able to get in touch with us. In the event that you do have to get a new flight itinerary, I would say please try to act as quickly as possible, even if the flight routing is different, because these options will fill up fast. So again, your flight routing and seating will probably change, but still try to get to tour as quickly as possible. Now, I always recommend travel insurance for everybody that travels with us. And there's a lot of good reasons for that, from medical coverage when you're traveling to things like lost luggage. One thing that people sometimes forget about is things that can happen to you when you are in transit. So one example is if you have our trip protection package and you have a really long flight delay, you could be reimbursed for purchasing a hotel room. So those are the kind of things that you should think about when you're considering travel insurance. Lastly, I just want to say, pack your patience. And if this happens to you, it's tough. I've been there. It's not fun, but it is temporary, and you will get through it. And we will do our best once you're on the ground to get you hitting the ground running and enjoying your tour as fast as possible. Okay, so now let's talk about your arrival in London. So for those of you that have purchased your flights with us here at Go Ahead, if you're arriving on either the standard arrival day for the tour or for the pre-extension that we have in London, then we're already planning to have a driver meet you at the airport. If you have purchased your own flights for either of these days, we can arrange this for you too, but you need to give us a call to talk about availability and pricing. Now, if you are coming in and you are going to be arriving on your own a few days before the tour starts, then you would have to arrange your own transportation to the hotel. Now let's talk about what you can expect when you arrive in London. So of course you're going to have to leave your plane. You're going to go through passport control. You can see big lines here. Heathrow is one of the busiest airports in the world, but that's normal. Now, one thing to bear in mind is that the driver that is going to meet you is going to be in the public arrivals area. So if you're by the luggage belt in the baggage claim area, you still have another step to go. You have to go from there into the public arrivals hall. So when you enter the public arrivals area, what you'll see is a bunch of folks lined up holding signs of different sorts. The drivers that we use to pick folks up in Heathrow are from a company called Addison Lee. And so what you should be looking for is a sign with your name on it, or with this name of a member of your travel party on it. And I would say have an expansive idea of what this sign could look like, because I've heard different things. I've heard iPads, I've heard whiteboards, pieces of paper, occasionally even a mobile phone. So hopefully it's bigger than that. But I would say keep looking around, have an expansive idea of what that sign could look like. Because if you've been on another Go Ahead tour, it will not be one of our signs. It will be one of these drivers holding up a sign with your name on it. From there, they're going to take you to the hotel. And Lexi, as I understand it, the hotel is where folks will meet their tour director.
Exactly, yes. So whether it's the pre-extension or whether it's the main tour, the tour director will be in the lobby waiting for you, because you all come at so many different times and the drivers are arriving all different times. So the tour director will be there all day waiting to meet each of you and greet you and explain about the evening, or give you an itinerary or something or other like that. Can I just add one other little thing as well? Is if you come out from the baggage hall to the arrivals hall and you do have like a green Go Ahead tag on your case, and you do have your green Go Ahead lanyard on, that is good, because the drivers work for Addison Lee, but I am seeing the same drivers all the time. Yes, oh, thank you, Nilsson.
Yeah, I'm holding one up right now. Yeah.
Yeah. I am seeing the same drivers all the time. They do know the Go Ahead logo, and you're just a little bit more visible. And as well, when you walk into that hotel lobby, the tour director is there, but some of the lobbies are really, really busy in London. So again, we'll spot the green logo and we'll know where you are. Just extra things to make sure, that you're visible, if you like.
Yes, and just so you know, the luggage tags and the lanyards that we've been referencing, these will arrive to you by mail about a week before you depart. So that's when you should expect to get those. But again, yeah, if you can have those on you when you enter that area, that would be helpful. Lexi, now this day, the first planned activity for the whole group on the arrival day for the main tour is a welcome meeting and dinner. Can you tell us a little bit about when and where that would typically take place for a group arriving on this tour?
Yes, so there's a welcome meeting usually with a drink as well, and that is almost always in the hotel. So that's very easy. You can just be there in the hotel, and then from there there's dinner afterwards. And usually in London, that is usually in a nearby pub or restaurant. It could be in the hotel sometimes if that's what suits that hotel and that location, but mostly it's a sort of 5 or 10 minute walk to a pub or restaurant, which is just great. So you do need to kind of bring your jacket to the welcome drink as well, because you go directly. I would say time-wise, it's the drink and then meeting is normally around 5:15, 5:30. I tend to look at my arrivals, and if they're all quite early, then you could make that earlier. But if they're all quite late-ish, you're kind of going to edge it towards the 5:30 kind of thing. So you don't want people to miss it. Yeah, so it's around then, and then dinner. And then usually, yeah, you don't want dinner too late, because that day people are quite tired, so dinner is kind of 6 or 6:30 or something like that. You can go later in the tour, you can be up late, but that night usually people are tired. So that's about it.
Great. So Lexi, I have one last question about the arrival day before we get into our tour overview. Now, in my experience, oftentimes people will be getting in earlier in the day, and typically hotel room check-in time is around 3 p.m. So if you have someone that, say, arrives at 9 in the morning and their room isn't ready yet, what would you recommend that they do during that time?
I would definitely recommend storing your case, and that's all included. You know, there's porters there, and I warn them, I speak to them. We always arrive the night before in London. So you're already at the hotel. You know, we've spoken to the hotel staff, reception know you're coming in early, the porters know, and they will store your case and give you a ticket. And then basically you are free, you know, to make the most. If you're lucky enough to be coming in early, I know you're tired. Everyone gets there and says, I'm too tired, but I kind of persuade people to go out, you know, make the most of it, and give them some ideas of what to do. So, you know, London is chocky. It's more like working out what, narrowing down your choices with London, because there's a lot. But you know, it might be something, if you're quite late in the day, then the tour director will suggest local things that are good. And if you come really early, definitely go, you know, go on the London Eye, go to the museum, go walk along South Bank, go, and you know, they'll say things further away and how to get there. So I would recommend storing your luggage and making the most of it.
Great, thank you. All right, so now we are into our section where we're going to do a quick overview of the tour, and then we're also going to talk about all the different excursions that we have available here. So Lexi, I'm going to turn it over to you for a few minutes. Can you give us a brief overview of this tour, beginning with the pre-extension in London for those that are doing that?
Yes. So if you're fortunate enough to be doing the pre-extension, that's great, because your jet lag is completely gone. You have that extra day. That's fantastic. So there's some pre-extension drinks the very first night. There isn't a meal, but so you can meet the other travelers that first evening after your tour director has met you. And then either you have a free day the next day, or there is an optional. But again, plenty to do in London, or do the optional, which is all organised for you, up to you. And then the next day, the main tour arrivals come in. So again, you have another day actually, so that's fantastic, you know. The main arrivals come in, and we've mentioned already the drink and the evening meal, which is great. And then the next morning, it's kind of the same pattern repeated then in Edinburgh and Dublin. You have a sightseeing with a local guide. So you have a blue badge qualified guide. They're amazing. And the sightseeing for each of the places actually is on the coach and walking. So it's a combination, because these are relatively, especially London is a really big city. So to see everything, and you've written down some included highlights for the London one, Big Ben, you know, well, actually Big Ben is the bell, which is inside the tower. But anyway, I won't tell you off. Buckingham Palace, you'll see all the big main sites, obviously. On that London tour, usually it ends around the palace, and that's the morning tour. And then in the afternoon, there is an optional if you would like that, and that's up to you. And then at the train, we've mentioned the train, as well as sort of, unfortunately, I mentioned the hardships of it with the luggage, but it's a fantastic, you know, it's great. It's 4.5 hours on the train. It's really beautiful. It's great. And then Edinburgh, and that evening there is a meal. Yes, there's a meal included dinner that evening, which is nice because you've only just arrived, so that's easy if you like, I suppose. And then the next morning there is the sightseeing, and for that one, the bus, and then the castle actually. So the guide also does the tour in that middle picture there, also does the tour in the castle, which is fabulous. It's kind of organically growing out of an extinct volcano. It's absolutely fab. So you've got that. And then in the afternoon, there is an optional if you would like that. And if not, it's sort of free time. And then the next day you carry on, you go back into England, and drive down to Liverpool, which is a fun city. It's a party city. Liverpool is really lively, and it's fun. And then you may or may not do the Beatles optional on that in that evening. So you stay a night in Liverpool, and then the next morning, as you can see in the little map there, you drive through North Wales. And actually Wales isn't mentioned much on this tour, but it's beautiful. It's only like a couple of hours, but so yeah, come back. My granny's Welsh, so I have to mention Wales. But it's beautiful scenery. At least you see the beautiful scenery of Wales, which is lovely. And you drive into Holyhead, and then over on the ferry, which is a dead easy experience. You know, your luggage disappears off from you, comes out on a carousel the other side, and it's very relaxing. It's really big. The ferry is Great. It's got sort of all sorts of, you can sit wherever you like. It's got bars, it's got cafes. There's usually a cinema if you really wanted. Very relaxing on the ferry. Get to Dublin, by then it's kind of 6-ish, so it's evening. And then that is a sort of relaxed free evening. You check in and everything. And then the next morning it is the sightseeing in the same format, and this time it's on the bus, and St. Patrick's Cathedral is sort of all included with the guide, which is really interesting, really great. And then for everyone it's always a free afternoon in Dublin, which you'll really enjoy. There's plenty to do there, and your tour director will help you, or you can be taken back to the hotel if you're tired. So you can either, opt to stay in the middle of Dublin with the TD pointing you in the right directions, or go back to the hotel and rest if that's what you would like. And then it gets more countryside-y. So if that's a proper word, sorry, I don't think it is, but anyway, what we say here. So then ultimately that next day, you're kind of going to County Kerry. But actually the stops are amazing. So you've got the Rock of Cashel on the way, and that is a kind of a shorter stop, but it's absolutely beautiful. It's a fairy tale looking castle, basically. It's you think Rapunzel's in there. It's wonderful. So that's a gorgeous sort of photo stop and just a quick breather, really. And the stop that is more significant is Blarney Castle, and that is a good lunchtime stop and a good chunk of time because the grounds are beautiful. So that's one where you stroll in the grounds. That's really nice. And then ultimately you're over to County Kerry and your hotel, which is close to the Ring of Kerry, which is the excursion for the next day. And actually in the hotel, there's almost always in the hotel, it is there's an included dinner on that day. So that is quite nice because you get there a bit, it's evening by the time you're there. So that's quite nice. That makes it easy. Then you have the Ring of Kerry, which is glorious. It's one whole day. It's actually only about 100 miles, but it kind of takes you all day because you do a lot of stops, and it's very beautiful, and it's a little windy road, and it's all around the peninsula. So that is just this. Well, you can see some scenery on the right hand photo there. It's beautiful, absolutely gorgeous. And you'll get every sort of weather on that day, all in one day, for sure. Whenever you're traveling in September, October, you'll get all the weather. So that's a complete day. And then the next day you leave and you go north to the cliffs of Moher, which are beautiful cliffs, which I think are behind Nilsen on the picture.
Oh yeah.
We
hope you get a clear day there.
Cliffs, yeah. So they're really lovely, and the time there, and then back to Dublin. And the hotel in Dublin normally is a bit more of a hotel close to the airport, so maybe not necessarily in the city centre for that, because you've had a lot of time in Dublin, but this time you're kind of wanting to be a bit closer to the airport, so usually it is a nice hotel a little bit closer to the airport. I think that's mainly it. It's I've made it sound very full on, but actually built in there is time to rest as well. It's both, really.
Yes, well, I mean, I did ask you to do it in about 5 minutes, so I think that there's just about no way to make it seem busy if it's that quick. One question that I did see a couple people ask was, how long is the ferry ride across to Dublin?
It is, I think, about 3 hours 10. Wait a minute, where's my last itinerary? I think I've got it. Let's look. The last time I did it, it was 2:45 p.m. it departed, and we arrived in Dublin at 6 p.m. So it's something around that, 3.25, something around
Great.
that. Mm-hmm.
All right, lovely. So what I'd like to do now is, as you were speaking, you were mentioning some of the excursions that are available at different points of the tour. So this first excursion, this is only available for those of you who are participating in the London pre-extension. But if you are, we do have the option to go to Stonehenge and Salisbury. So Lexi, can I ask you to tell us a bit more about what's in store for us on this day?
Okay, it's lovely. It's a complete day. It's it is to drive to Stonehenge. It is a couple of hours from London. You're driving it. It's a chance, I guess, to see sort of something outside of London and in the southwest as well. And you're going, well, a cool 5,000 years of history is basically what you're doing today. So you'll have already maybe seen. Oh no, you won't have. Sorry, it's the pre-extension. You will see the Tower of London and these places that are 1,000 years old, but we are going back about 5,000 years. And yeah, you're looking at the stones and thinking about, and there's a museum, and you go out to the stones and you have an audio guide thinking about, why our ancestors decided to make this henge, to make this circle with the stones in exactly these positions, and then actually move them a couple of times over a couple of hundred years, 5,000 years ago. It's really interesting. It's really great. And then you leave Stonehenge and you travel to Salisbury, and usually, I think all the TDs do this, by then people are really hungry. So you need to give some free time for lunch. Food's important. Free time for lunch in Salisbury, which is a pretty little market town. It's lovely. And then you normally go to the cathedral, and usually there is a guide at the cathedral. If you can manage to get a guide, usually that's the case, which is really interesting. Beautiful old Gothic cathedral. It's stunning, absolutely huge and stunning when you're there. So there is that. And then it's back to London, and I don't estimate a time because I can't quite remember, but you're kind of back to London. It is 6-ish or something like that, I would say, in the evening by the time you're back.
Great. And for those of you, I don't know if anyone out there is a Pillars of the Earth fan, the books by Ken Follett, but apparently Salisbury Cathedral was the inspiration for the cathedral in that book series. So if you're a fan of that series, this would be one that you would want to be involved in. Now, let's talk about the excursions that are going to be available to everyone, because these ones are going to be on the main tour. So let's talk about Windsor Castle. This one actually was a personal favorite of mine. I love this excursion.
It's gorgeous. It's amazing. So again, we just talked about the tower a minute ago. So this is around 1,000 years of history. So it was one of the fortifications really that was built around London after the Norman conquest, after the Normans invaded in 1066. So London needed to be protected. So there's several castles. Windsor is the oldest continuously inhabited castle in the world. It's fabulous. It's glorious. You can see the long walk there up. It is the castle where the late Queen liked to be. Apparently she called Buckingham Palace the office, which I think is hysterical, but she loved Windsor. I guess it was a bit out of it. You kind of travel, I suppose, 3/4 of an hour from London. It is around something like that. Bit of time for lunch. Nice. Windsor again, like Salisbury, lovely little town, typical English town. And then you go with the guide, and it's the same guide from the morning, and you go into the castle, and it's a guided tour of the grounds and everything, and then some free time in the castle, and then back to London, usually by about 5:30ish, I would say.
Great, because I just actually, Mary had a question about that. She was asking about if she had this tour, what time would it get back? So can you repeat what time you think you would get back approximately?
I think about 5:30.
Great. Now, one thing that we do have as a note on the screen here is that Windsor Castle does close on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. So on days when it's closed, Lexi, can you talk about Hampton Court? Because Hampton Court Palace is where we would take folks if their tour happens to fall on a day when Windsor Castle is closed.
Yes, I mean, now it's a shame Windsor Castle is now closed for 2 days. I mean, that happened sort of a few years ago, but yeah, it's up to the monarch. We can't really influence that one. But Hampton Court is gorgeous. It's absolutely beautiful, and the grounds are more stunning actually than Windsor Castle. So that one, there's 2 different styles of architecture there. So, but mainly probably they'll talk about Henry VIII at Hampton Court Palace. So again, the same format. You go there is free time for lunch, and then it's a whole guided tour with the guide. It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. It's beautiful. You go into you go into the kitchens and all the working parts actually in Hampton Court. You go into a lot of different areas and different courtyards. One is the later one is Edwardian. So you kind of get both. Yeah, it's a great experience.
Great. I'm going to take us north now. This is going to be during our time in Edinburgh. We have an excursion to go out to Abbotsford House and Melrose Abbey. It looks beautiful. Can you tell us about Abbotsford House?
Yeah, it's lovely. So you travel south from Edinburgh. So it's in the afternoon after the sightseeing in the morning. You travel south, I would say it's an hour and a quarter, something like that, maybe an hour if you're lucky, but it could be an hour and a quarter to the Borders region. It's very, very pretty. The River Tweed is very close by, and on the picture it is the home of Sir Walter Scott. So if you're at all interested in literature, I would say it's a must. And even if you're not, he's a really interesting man. It's kind of a museum. He was a real collector, and he had all sorts of things. There's all sorts in there. So that's a guided tour, but you have lunch first. So lunch is in the cafe first, which sort of looks across to the house. Probably about that view, actually. That's probably from the cafe. So it looks over to the house. You have lunch there, and then you go into the house with the guide. So the TD as well, but it's a guided tour for that one. And then after that, you go to Melrose Abbey, which is ruins of the abbey, which is really interesting. It was a monastery as well. So you kind of get an idea of what it was like when the monks settled there, and Christianity in the area, and how the lay people joined, and then a village grew up, and you kind of get a good feel for it. But it's a very beautiful abbey ruins of a Gothic abbey, so very pretty.
Lovely. Now, the next excursion that we have available, you mentioned this during our time in Liverpool. Of course, in Liverpool, you think of the Fab Four. So tell us a little bit about the Beatles History and Story Museum excursion.
Yes. So the first bit of it, you're absolutely correct. So the first bit of it is you go into actually, no, it could be, occasionally it could be the other way around, but doing too much detail there. But you usually go into the museum first for an hour and a quarter, something like that. It's a fab museum. Fab. I didn't mean to say that. It's a great museum, full of memorabilia and full of information about the Beatles and the music, and it's really good. And then you have the bus tour, which is part of it, and that goes to all the essential places, Strawberry Fields and Penny Lane, and the parents' houses and Aunt Mimi's house and that kind of thing. And so that is with the guide. So the museum bit, it's self-guided with an audio guide, and then the TD meets you, and you go to the bus, which is 1 minute walk, and then you have that tour, and then back to the hotel.
Great. The next excursion, this one is going to be in Ireland. We have our traditional Irish dinner and show. So Lexi, can you tell us what is involved in this dinner and show, what that's like?
Yeah, that's fab. It's always one of two places, and they're both great. So they're kind of very big pubs, or pubs that they put a stage in. So it's like the original pub. So you've got that aspect of it, but they've kind of put a stage in. They have musicians, they have dancers, and you have a meal. So I think you kind of eat. As I remember, you eat like a course, and then there might be a part on the stage, some musicians, and then you eat another course, and then there's another part. So it's a 3-course meal with Irish coffee and all the gubbins that you want. And then the dancing and singing and musicians. And the musical instruments will be as well some of the rare instruments that you don't see everywhere. So like the Eland pipe, and yeah, different instruments that are very specific to Ireland. And the dancing is great. So yes.
Lovely. Now, Lexi, thank you so much for giving us that overview of the tour and also these excursions. I really appreciate it.
No problem. No problem at all.
All right, so we are just about ready for our question and answer period, and I've seen them coming in fast and furious. We actually have a lot in there. I'm going to give it another 2 or 3 minutes where folks can submit questions. So because we do want to try to get to as many of these as possible. So if you do have any questions, please submit those now. Before we get to the Q&A, I want to just offer one more reminder to please download the Go Ahead Tours app. It's very helpful for you before and during tour. And one thing that we are asking people to do is to leave an evaluation of their time with us on tour. You can do this during the tour. It probably takes about 5 minutes each day, and then you can do it for up to 5 days after you get home for tour. And one thing that I would say is here in the office, it's really important to us to know about everything in the tour. But in particular, we love to hear about the people that you interact with on your tour. So please do leave an evaluation for your tour director and for the different folks that you interact with. All right, Lexi, I see we have a lot of questions submitted already. So I'm going to leave this open for another minute or so before we close it out, because I think we're going to go over our hour here with the ones we have. But the first question that I have is from Beverly. And Beverly asks, can we be sure that we get clean water for our reusable water bottles? I've heard that especially like in Scotland and everything, the water is actually like very crisp and clean. But throughout the tour, you shouldn't have any problems with just getting good water out of the tap, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, well, we all drink all of the water all of the time. And we're relatively usual, not too crazy. But yes, I mean, generally, I would say the water's great. We don't tend to buy water. It's very rare that we buy water. So my most experience of sort of buying water is in the US and Canada, actually. We refill the water everywhere. And yeah, particularly I'd say Scotland and Ireland will be very clean. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. And in these destinations, I've, traveled and refilled my water bottle and had no issues whatsoever. The next question is from Emilio, and I can take this. The question is, will we have the same tour director throughout the whole trip? Yes, that is my expectation, is that you would have the same tour director throughout the whole trip.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the next question is from Sharon. The question is, how available are banks so you can get smaller bills in euros or pounds?
I would like to say they're very available, but the truth is, I mean, they're closed. They're open on a Saturday morning. They're closed on a Saturday afternoon. They're closed on a Sunday. They are available during the week, but they close at 5 for sure. So they're not fantastically available. You can always ask if you buy something. Always you can ask for your change to be in smaller notes. We wouldn't say bills so much, but in smaller notes rather than larger. And then if you do change some money, if you're bringing some cash, can you ask from the beginning? We can do this here, but actually I have no knowledge of whether you can do that where you live, actually, but we can ask for small notes from the beginning. That would be slightly better. I would say things like £50 notes are a bit tricky. Not in London, because, yeah, big city, but somewhere else they could be a bit tricky, or €50 notes or something. You want lower than that for sure. So they're not fantastically. If you use the ATM, usually they're in pounds, 10s or 20s. No, not 5 so much anymore, 10s and 20s, and euros the same, actually, if in Ireland. If you use the ATMs, they're relatively low denominations.
You know what my strategy is, and this is sort of particular to me, but whenever I go and I get money out of the ATM so that I can have small bills, I go and I buy a magnet, because I collect magnets from everywhere that I go. So I buy a magnet to break my bills, and then I have the smaller change when they give it to me back. So that's the way I do it. The next question is from Nydia, and Nydia says, do we tip the Addison Lee drivers? I'm sure they would appreciate a tip. Yes. If you wish, I would say definitely. That's one reason that it might be helpful to have a little bit of local currency before you leave. The next question is from Michelle, and Michelle asks, is the arrival process any different for those who booked the extension? Lexi, can I ask you to answer that?
It's exactly the same. No, it really is exactly the same with the Addison Lee drivers and you coming out of the baggage hall into the arrivals hall and them bringing you to the hotel. No, it's exactly the same.
Great. The next question is from Wayne, and Wayne asks, during the tour, what time does a typical day start and end? I think start would probably be easier to do than end, because it can vary a little bit with the ending, right?
Yeah. I would say, so definitely when the sightseeing London is always 8:30. The sightseeing Edinburgh is usually 8:30. Dublin more like 9 for those 3 sort of sightseeing days. The other days around the same, although the day you drive to Liverpool, that is quite a long way. So I would say most TDs starting at 8 for that one. Yeah, definitely, because you've got Beatles tour plus you want some free time in Liverpool. That one I would say 8. The ferry day is not too bad. The train day is not too bad, not too early. Yeah, something like that, I would say. And then like you say, the returning back to the hotel, that depends on whether you've booked an excursion or not, really. And usually 5:36-ish if you have, say Abbotsford and Melrose at 6-ish, something like that. The Dublin afternoon is free. The driving days in Ireland, like the Ring of Kerry, it is all day, but you'd be back 4-ish, I would say, if you leave at 9-ish, something like that, 9 till 4:30 on that one. The Cliffs of Moher Day, actually, that one could be longer, that last day, purely because you leave County Kerry, you go up to the Cliffs of Moher. So this is day 11, and then you're back to Dublin, and the back to Dublin is relatively far. That one could be a bit of a longer day, because you don't want to leave too late in the morning, probably 8 till 6, but then there's a big break in the middle. There's a massive break in the middle. So yeah, something approximating those guidelines.
Great, thank you. So the next question is from Sharon, and Sharon says, do we need to carry all our money, passport, credit cards, debit, and ID on us at all time? Also, are purses used by women? I bought a money belt for this trip. So when I read this, my first thought is, no, it's not necessary to carry all of those things with you, right?
No, I would recommend not, ideally. I mean, all of the hotels will have a safe. So I would suggest putting your passport and some of your money in the safe. The only thing is, don't forget when you leave the hotel. I've had that happen before, that a young man left his things in the safe, but I do mention it on the coach before we actually start driving. But yeah, I would suggest leave the sort of big things in the safe and don't carry everything with you. You shouldn't need ID anywhere unless you're a young person in a pub, maybe, because the drinking age is 18 or something, but really you shouldn't need ID in any of the places, actually. So I would suggest not carrying it, mainly. Obviously, the days where we travel, you're traveling from one place to the next, then you are going to have it on you, aren't you, that day? Yeah. Unfortunately, there's not much we can do about that. You do need to have it on you that day. And for women, I would say a money belt is a great idea. It is it's very sensible. I tend to wear a crossbody bag that I just pretty much keep on all the time generally, and I make sure the bag is around the front, because in London we do have a little, there is a little bit of the pickpocketing going on sometimes in London. So I would have a crossbody bag and just make sure it's at the front. So we'd call that a handbag, but I think you call that a purse, don't you? So yeah, that would be my recommendations.
Good tips. Great. So I'm going to move forward to the next question. This one's from Linda, and this one's about breakfast. Linda's wondering, what is offered for breakfast? Is it a hot meal or just a muffin?
Usually it's a hot meal. I would say it's both. So there's the cold buffet, which is a croissants and that kind of thing. And I would say almost always, almost without a doubt, there is a hot meal as well. So, in England, you can have a full English breakfast, as we say. So it's a fried egg and sausage and piece of bacon and baked beans and a fried tomato. And in Scotland, a Scottish breakfast is very similar with some haggis as well. If you want to try that, have a go. It's exciting. You only live once. It's a very meaty thing. And in Ireland, a full Irish breakfast, and you would have black pudding or white pudding with that usually. So I would say it's always a cooked breakfast, to be honest.
Great. This question is from Abigail, and Abigail was wondering, what are the best options for transport during free afternoons?
Okay, so in London, I would recommend the Underground, the tube, without any problems at all. It's really, really easy. It goes all over London. The lines are color-coded. They're very clearly signposted. The staff that work there are really great and really explain everything to you with great detail. They're really nice. You can absolutely go down and pop up anywhere in London. And if you kind of if you realize that's not where you wanted to be, you go back in and go back again. I would definitely say that. For Edinburgh, I would say walking is, if you can, walking is great, but it is hilly. So there are local buses that you would need, depending on where you need to go, you'd need to look up the number. But your TD can help you with that bit. Or in Edinburgh, taxis or Uber is very easy. Taxis and Uber are easy in London too, by the way, no problem. And then in Ireland, in Dublin, they don't have Uber, but the taxis are good. And if you use the Uber app, it just comes up with the taxi information. So you can use the Uber app if you wanted. But again, if you can walk in Dublin, it's small like Edinburgh. you will see the most. So if you can, I would. In Dublin, there's also the tram, the Luas. So snail on rail, they call it, but it is very effective, very cheap. It is. But yeah, so you have that too. So yeah, different depending on which place.
Great. And so I would say when you're there, you can always chat with your tour director. I mean, they are such a good resource to help you with this, but yeah, it can vary depending on where you are. The next question is from Rex, and Rex asks, is there any concern about venturing too far from the hotels and getting into sketchy areas?
I would say, generally speaking, no. Although, I mean, I would counsel, definitely be as careful as you would at home, because sometimes people forget that. Definitely do that. And then definitely a bit more because you're somewhere you don't know. So this is on free time when you're on your own, I'm thinking. Also, your TD is going to give you recommendations of places to go. They are no way going to send you into a sketchy area ever. So,
Yeah.
Listen to what they say. They will say good places to go to, and I would look at that. In London, certainly, you're very unlikely, because it's so big and we're mostly in the centre's still really big, you're very unlikely to be going right out to the East End or anywhere, and even that's, relatively speaking, we're not talking guns or anything like that in these sort of, in the UK and in Ireland. But yeah, I would say be sensible and listen to your TD, and any doubt, you call a taxi. Obviously, use the taxi apps that your TD will tell you. Free Now is a really good one in all of the places, or Uber. And be aware, like you would at home, and have a feel. Don't be too necessarily lost in a really big map on the street, necessarily. That would be my sort of general advice. But yeah, TD specific, and will tell you the local places.
Yes, I think those are good tips. The next question was about the train ride to Scotland. This is from Clifford. Lexi, can you repeat how long the train ride is from London to Edinburgh?
I think it's 4.5. Let me look at my last tour, actually, while I'm here. Hang on, departure for Ed. Okay, last tour, we left at 10:30 on the train from King's Cross Station in London, and we arrived in Edinburgh at 3:10. So yes, that was the last tour that I did. It's something around that.
Great. All right, so that'd be about 5 hours approximately. Yeah. The next question is, this is a good one. This is from Aramis, and it's about the sightseeing tour in Edinburgh. It says, are we going to see the Stone of Destiny in Scotland?
Yeah, the Stone of Scone. So in the castle, so the stone moved, I think Aramis looks like very switched on. The stone moved in the coronation and went under the coronation chair, because you always need the crowning is always in the coronation chair on the stone, and there's a little place for it in West. You can see it really well in Westminster Abbey. It's a long story, that one. I mean, the stone should have always been in Scotland, but anyway, it was in London for a long time. It went back to Scotland. It came down for the coronation, and it's back up again. So yes, it's there. So it is in the castle right now, or it certainly was last time I went. I have no reason to believe it won't be there. But yes, and we also mentioned pieces of the stone in Ireland. Actually, when we go to Cashel, there's a kind of a piece of the stone. Coronations were there as well, in more than 1,000 years ago, and we mention it in Blarney Castle too as well, actually. So the tour kind of links in.
Wonderful. The next question I have is from Gail, and Gail was wondering, is it possible to visit the Queen's grave?
In the chapel in Windsor. I believe not, actually, but I could be wrong. That might change. I believe that could possibly change, but I believe not.
Okay. The next question is from Clifford, and this is about Windsor. So he would say, would this fall on Sunday, meaning that St. George's Chapel is closed? Can we add that later? So I would say getting out to Windsor is pretty tricky. I went there on a day when St. George's was closed, and it is a little bit of a bummer, but I would say that probably in your time in London, it would be really difficult to get back out there. Lexi, do you think I'm on track with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would. I mean, if it's the Windsor, the go ahead Windsor optional, it could potentially fall on a Sunday. I think usually it doesn't, just the way the start date. So I think it generally doesn't. You can add it late, usually for Windsor, relatively. You would have to ask your tour director if you were just adding it later. But yes, going there yourself. Time you get to the relevant station in London and get to Windsor, that's a little bit tricky. Yeah.
Thank you. The next question is about the Beatles tour. You did say that, this is from Linda, but you did say that we would get to, do they stop at Penny Lane so people could pop out and take a photo?
Every time I've been on it, we have. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, everybody jumps out and takes the road sign picture and walks up and down. And yeah, I think they always stop there. Yeah.
Great. And Ida is interested in music. Ida was wondering, is there live music in most pubs?
Live music in Dublin almost everywhere, not necessarily in the other places. I would say, I mean, there's one whole chain of pubs which is in the UK, which is a really sort of cheap chain where you get the cheapest pint really, but it's very good value for money, and that's called Wetherspoons, and they have a policy of no music. It's cheap and cheerful, but it's very cheap. But I would say in Dublin there's a lot of live music, you know, and you soon can wander in and decide and wander out again quickish before you buy a pint, can't you? But I would say everywhere else, not necessarily. It may or may not be. And some pubs more than others. And on a Friday night, say in Edinburgh, there might always be in that pub, but not on a Thursday night or something like that. So it takes a little bit of looking at, but your TD should know, or yes. So not, but Dublin, yes, or Ireland, almost always, all over the place. Yeah.
Great. So the next question is from Cynthia, and this is one I don't know the answer to, so it's always dangerous to ask a question you don't know the answer to. But Cynthia asks, can we hire a driver for an off day in London?
I think you can, and I have had a couple who did that recently, and we just looked together and we kind of just Googled it in the end, because I didn't sort of know like that where that should be really. We kind of found something on Google and they did do it and it was great. Otherwise, I would sort of look at the Uber app and just put in the places and see how much it shows, you know, in price. But you mean a kind of a seamless experience, I suppose, don't you? Actually, I don't have a particular recommendation, because that time we just looked at it. It wasn't something that I'd had before, and we looked it up, but we did find something. So with a bit of sort of messing about and looking at it with the tour director, I think you would find something.
Yeah, I mean, if you're staying within London, you might be able to get by with just doing the taxis. The taxis there are great. So, the next question is from Jorge, and Jorge is asking about the audio guides. If we use audio guides, at points he was wondering if they might be available in Spanish.
I guess it depends where you mean. So the 3 city tours on this tour, so London, Edinburgh, and Dublin, that is with a guide, and we use the Vox radios, well, not really radios, but a Vox system is probably the proper way to say it, and that is an earpiece, but that is the guide speaking, and he or she is speaking English for that, definitely, because that's the thing with that, it's personal and of the time, and he's answering questions, or she is. So that's that.
I think you may have been referring to the Beatles experience, because we were talking about how you were mentioning that there is an audio guide there, right?
Absolutely. Beatles, definitely. That's dead easy. So just tell the tour director, actually, because I normally put it in my email that I think everybody wants it in English, but we'll look at the time, because they usually get them ready in advance. So if you can tell a TD in advance, great, they'll fire off an email. But if not, they will change it. It's the same audio guide. They can just change the language. And Stonehenge is the other one. There is an audio guide on your phone for that, if you would like, which is very good, because Stonehenge is kind of, you go out to the stones yourself normally and look at it, and that is definitely, you can choose any language too. So I'd say anything that's not with the sort of go-ahead guides where that is English, definitely you can easily change the language. Yeah,
great. The last question I have for you, this one's a little bit tricky, but so Mary, as I read her question, is going to be coming into England a couple of days early. And her plan is to then spend a few days up in Bath and then come back to London for the beginning of the tour. If you were advising someone in her position, what would you say is the best way to get to and from Bath?
Well, actually, I go to Bath all the time. My eldest son lives there. So our eldest son lives there. Yeah, so we're there. It's a lovely place. Very good choice. It's beautiful. The beautiful stone, and you've got the Roman baths, and you've got a lot to look at. It's great. I tend to drive, obviously, but from London, I would get the train. So I would get the train, and you can go to Bath directly. I would say that is there is a National Express coach, which would be cheaper than the train, but a lot longer. The train is pleasant and easy, I would say, relatively easy. The coach will go from Victoria Coach Station, so it's a long distance coach, not a bus, if you know what I mean. And that would be a little bit cheaper, but either, and it's a lovely place to go to. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, Lexi, I want to thank you so much for answering our questions and staying on 15 minutes late to help us get through them all. So I really do appreciate your help answering those questions.
Brilliant. No problem at all. It was great. And it's a pleasure. Thank you. Yeah.
Wonderful. So I do want to remind you that if you do have more questions as you get closer to your tour, the best place to start is at our help center at goaheadtours.com/help. Now, Lexi, before we say goodbye today, do you have any last thoughts or words for our travelers?
Just to say, I wish you an amazing tour. It's a lovely tour. It's a great tour because you've got the sort of the big cities, and you've got the countryside as well. So you do have the best of it all with that tour. It's a fabulous tour. Yeah, it was a pleasure. I hope it helped, and it was a pleasure. And I would like to say nice to meet you, but I can't see any of you. But you just have to words to that effect. Even though I can't see you, it's been great. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lexi. I really appreciate having you here. And I also want to thank all of you at home for joining us. It's lovely to have you here as you're getting prepared for your tour. And I want to say thank you for choosing EF and Go Ahead. And thank you for choosing this itinerary. On behalf of my colleagues who are going to be meeting you not too long, I want to say safe travels, and we will see you soon. Thank you.
Bye.